Hello, everyone. Hope you are having a great day so far. My name is Dan Pierce, and today we are joined by Scott Silverman. He is an addiction recovery expert, crisis coach, and family navigator. And today we'll be talking about the opioid epidemic. Scott has been featured across the media in publications you've probably heard of, like CBS, CNBC, NPR, and just pretty much everything. He was named a hero by CNN. Scott, thanks so much for joining us.
Well, thanks, Dan. I just like to tell people, Scott H. Silverman, just Google me. It's so much more easier, and then you can pick what you like and what you don't like and what you want to see. So, it's really great to be here and be able to have a platform to talk about, the stigma, addiction, and of course the opioid crisis is significantly overwhelming right now in San Diego. We call it America's finest city, 8th largest city in the country. We just experienced a 400% increase in overdoses, primarily due to opioids, and a big part of it's around fentanyl, unfortunately. So, we're really trying to get the word out. So, because, young people are like you, Dan, they think they're invincible and they want to party, and they should. I mean, it's important. Just because I can't do it anymore because someone took my permit for partying, that doesn't mean other people shouldn't enjoy life. The problem is today, counterfeit medication is so accessible. People are making it in their garage. And if you take a pill that's laced with fentanyl, there's a high probability that you may overdose. And most people aren't walking around with Narcan to save somebody's life. I mean, I have it in my car and I carry it with me whenever I go out to large settings, because the odds are there's going to be somebody in the room that may have been, taking it the night before or that morning and having a negative reaction to it. So I'm glad to be here. And I wake up every morning and try to encourage people to make a phone call and see if we can help them get their loved ones access to treatment.
Yeah, absolutely. That's interesting what you mentioned about what's happening in San Diego, because I think that's indicative of what's happening across the country and maybe even across the world. I saw some statistics recently it said, according to the National Survey on Drug Use and Health in 2020, 70,630 people died from drug overdose in 2019. 10.1 million misused prescription opioids in the past year. Seems like this issue is just getting bigger and bigger. Is that accurate?
Yes, and it's probably conservative because the data is usually about a year old. And when we factor in COVID from last year, I think that we're going to find that not only is behavioral health issues, the complications with, mental health issues, the complication, I believe alcohol consumption's up 70%. And if anybody had a problem, let's just say that somebody was an active user or an aggressive partier, someone like Lisa here, who probably every weekend brought her friends over and probably went a little too far. During COVID, people isolating, that level of consumption increased dramatically. Alcohol's up 70% for the year. And that's based on retail sales. And that's assuming nobody had alcohol at home before, and most everybody did. So when you start to factor in that, and then of course, the isolation, the disconnection, and the lack of socialization, it's a real problem for most people, because who in the world had the coping skills to go through the event we had last year? Nobody. I mean, I know personally professionals and friends of professionals in our community who have taken their own life. I know one guy who knows 4 psychiatrists over the fact that, their life changed. They're used to seeing people and working with them physically. That went away. And that impacted them dramatically to the point that many of them have taken their own life. So, and with first responders, same thing. We work with veterans now at Confidential Recovery. And, when you're suffering from all kinds of issues, it's so hard to get out of it. It's like being in quicksand, and the harder you fight, the deeper sometimes you go.
Yeah, I think that's a really great analogy. I definitely noticed that in my life as well. Different people that were kind of, maybe on the edge of struggling or really struggling were really pushed over by the pandemic. I lost a good friend to overdose last year. And it's just really sad. It sucks to see so many lives affected. And it's easy, when we look at these statistics, it's kind of hard to conceptualize all the real lives that are affected and all the family members that are left behind, all the therapists that are heartbroken when they lose a client. There's a lot going on the sort of, ground level that is just really, really difficult. So what do you make of all this? I mean, we've been talking about the opioid epidemic since first time I remember talking about it was in 2008. That was the first time it popped up as like a big thing, kind of went away a little bit. And then now it's back in full force. What do you think the future looks like as far as like how this problem progresses and hopefully how it's solved? What do you think that's looking like?
Well, the simple answer is we're all kind of screwed. I think a more strategic response would be, it's interesting your point about 2008, because back in those days, I was hearing whispers of it. And what's happened is the pharmaceutical market of people getting prescription opioids pretty much has been, well, not shut down completely, because there's a lot of pill mills out there, doctors that are still script writing, but the catastrophic events that started happening, that number you gave, a little over 70,000, which is more people than died in Vietnam. And that was in 1 year. And, this opioid crisis has been going on for a minimum of 10 years that we know about. And finally, I think it was 3 years ago now, the Surgeon General finally came out and said, hey, I don't think he framed it like that. He had probably a 75-page document, but the executive summary talks about the fact how OxyContin, which was primarily was manufactured by the one company, Purdue, and the Sackler family, that was one of their biggest medications. I think it was 98% of their business was pretty much created to deal with pain. And the long-term studies, the longitudinal studies show that long-term use of prescribed, by the doctor, fulfilled prescription by the pharmacist, was not working for long-term treatment of pain. So when the aha moment came, and then the class action lawsuits came, and all of a sudden there's this global awareness that the DEA is trying to slow things down. Criminal justice is now going after people that sell opioids. What happened was the script writing, dosing started to go down. Doctors stopped prescribing it, but didn't have a replacement for people who suffered from pain. So people were substituting. So you'd normally go to the doctor over the years, you get a 90-day prescription, and that would last, over time, 60 days and down to 30 days and down to 2 weeks. Because when you talk to people that got addicted to opioids, they had to consume a certain amount every day to beat that level of diminishing the pain. And the pain was really, more in the brain. And the problem was with the opioids, it wasn't working to deal with the actual pain problem. So people started substituting. And now we're seeing this huge growth in fentanyl consumption. Originally China was manufacturing it, and then it went to Mexico now, because Mexico was losing their market share with methamphetamine. So now they're competing with each other to get this medication out even further, and to the point that they're taking it up to Canada now to be exported into the US, because the US is heightened awareness, and we all know what happened the last couple of years at our borders. So it's like a perfect storm now. And then, most people don't even talk about the dark web. You and I, Dan, and maybe Lisa, if she's got some extra coin around, we could pony up $5,000. Every time I say this, I hope I'm not planting a seed with some knucklehead out there who's thinking, hey, I could use a micro enterprise coming out of my apartment. $5,000, you can buy enough substance to create millions of dollars worth of fentanyl, because it's not that hard to make. And you can, you have to distribute it, and you have a risk factor that goes on. But right now, if you wanted to order it on the dark web, and you can use electronic money, so there's no paper trail. And I've heard this from U.S. attorneys, the DEA, and other experts. Tracking this kind of distribution is almost impossible, because you can move your IP address around when you're doing it electronically and virtually through the dark web. So the bottom line is that $5,000 investment can help make somebody millions. So there are a lot of people out there that have jumped on the wagon, because it's not only a resource for income, but it's also a very potent drug, and it kills people. And when you hear the stories about, I used to be an unlicensed pharmacist, as you know, and my drug of choice in those days was methamphetamine. But when I hear the stories about these people who get caught and with large amounts of fentanyl, and then they cop a plea and maybe roll over on somebody, but their stories, when they're asked the question, why would you sell a product and have your consumer die using your product? And their answer is, ready for this? If somebody dies behind fentanyl and it hits the news media, he says, our sales spike. So it's good for business. So that's what I mean by the perfect storm. So all these people, and by the way, in 2016, there were 264 million prescriptions written for Oxycontin. Now that's just 5 years ago. And there was a study that just came out that said that 61% of those prescriptions still sit in medicine cabinets. 61%. Because most people, you have a toothache, you break an arm, something happens, you have surgery, you get the meds, and then you put them away and you don't know what to do with them. You can't put them down the sewer system, and you can't put them in the dump. So what happens is people save them with the understanding that, one day I might need these. Yeah. So 61% of those 264 million prescriptions still sit in medicine cabinets. I run a small little nonprofit called Safe Homes Coalition, and our mission is to help people dispose of unused and unsafe medication, because most people don't even think about it. And this nonprofit started years ago here in San Diego behind the idea that people were actually, ready for this, going into open houses and stealing the Oxycontin, targeting, not jewelry, not cash, but the Oxycontin sitting in the medicine cabinet. An 80 milligram Oxycontin pill right now on the street sells for $80. So it's kind of scary when you think about it. So when Oxycontin prescriptions, going back to the point, started to diminish, people were substituting. That's when we saw, you look at the last 5 years, Google heroin sales skyrocketed. And then when fentanyl came in, because it's cheaper, and to make heroin, it requires a big process. And then it's got to be, imported into this country, just like cocaine. So it's so much easier to make these other drugs. And that's what's happening. And kids, young people, in their teens are going to parties and they're taking these medications. I don't know if you've heard of them. It's called Skittle parties, where kids go in, they bring medication to a party and they put it in a big bowl. Oh, and at a certain time, everybody goes to the bowl and grabs something. And the sophisticated drug dealer who's making, counterfeit medication with fentanyl. And that's why you hear about how young people are they're overdosing, and they call them accidental overdoses. And I used to really resent that until I really understood what it meant. What it means is you take something, you don't know what the dosing is, and you end up dying because there's no quality assurance with street drugs.
That's scary stuff. Yeah, I definitely, I've been there as a younger person myself. I had, addiction challenges myself. So I totally get it, but it's pretty scary. They're taking sort of a mystery drug with no dosage. And I can see why that would lead to overdoses.
Right. And they don't even think of it as a mystery drug. It's a party drug.
Right.
And of course now with, legalization of marijuana and how vaping, was created supposedly to terminate cigarette smoking, people are now using, vaping pipes, if you will, mechanisms to, bring in different things into their body, whether it's THC or liquefied methamphetamine or even fentanyl. So I don't like to judge anybody. I don't like to tell anybody what to do. But at the end of the day, if you're not making informed decisions, and you're seeing this new, I don't know if you've seen it yet, this Demi Lovato. I didn't really know who she was because she's, like, I don't know, 50 years younger than me.
Come on, you got to get
her article.
She's a pop star.
Well, I know. I mentioned my daughter. Oh my God. Anyway, she wrote. There was a big article a buddy of mine wrote, Ryan Hampton, about what's going on now. She's calling it California sober. I don't know if you've heard the term yet. Where she had some catastrophic events with her overdose to the point that she had 3 strokes, a heart attack, and evidently her vision hasn't even completely returned yet. And there's a new article I saw yesterday from an addiction publication talking about New Jersey sober. somebody is touting that. And what, you know what that is, right? This California sober or New Jersey sober, where somebody has a drug of choice and then they get off of it, but they continue to do other things that are mood altering with the idea that that wasn't the drug that they were using. So it's okay. And again, if somebody chooses to do that and wants to stay at home and not get behind the wheel, I don't want to say more power to you. I want to say, look, you're making your informed decision. Try not to influence other. And Dimmy, you know, from what I've learned about it, is obviously a huge platform, major influencer. So I can just see kids now, you know, that got forced into treatment because what happened to them in their teens and 20s. And now they're thinking, well, wait a minute, you're telling me since I gave up heroin, I can go ahead and smoke marijuana and I can drink if I want to because I want to be California sober. And the science behind addiction, if somebody truly has the disease, is they'll creep back to their drug of choice. That is what science says. So again, I with my history, I'm in no position to judge anybody else, and I would never try to tell somebody else what to do. But we're getting some weird messaging right now. You know, it's like the Orange County housewives and the Florida housewives. We're going to see that, you know, California sober. I can't imagine Texas sober is going to look pretty interesting because, you know, Texas, they do everything big there. But everyone's going to have a thing. They're going to start calling it that. And they're going to be people that start distributing and catering to that mindset.
That's interesting. And you bring up a lot of good points, but I will push back a little bit, if that's okay.
Okay.
So I actually used to really be more very from your same perspective that, you know, you're either sober and you're off everything or you're not. The first time I heard about California sober was with Demi Lovato. But I did know prior to that, many people who were using cannabis specifically for their mental health and to help them stay off of more harmful drugs like fentanyl, heroin, pills, and whatnot. So yeah, I was very much against that early on, but you know, kind of over time, just through my own experience, through experiences of friends and professionals that I've talked to, I've come around to the idea that, you know, maybe a certain amount of harm reduction is actually a good thing. And somebody put it this way once, and it was kind of crass, but he said, you can't treat a corpse, right? So if someone is out there using fentanyl and heroin, you can't really help them because they're going to overdose and die. But if they're consuming copious amounts of pot, you know, they can smoke as much pot as they possibly can, and nothing will happen. You know, they might eat some brownies and, you know, not perform at their highest level of peak performance, but they're going to be alive. They can get treatment. They live another day.
Dan, where's the pushback? Get to the pushback. Don't soften this blow. Bring it. What do you want to talk about? What do you say?
That is the pushback. That I think, you know, California sober with cannabis and, you know, CBD and things like that. That's a way to do things. I know a lot of people that use kratom. That's a pain relief medication that people are using instead of opiates. So I personally, as like you said, you know, we're kind of screwed here, right? Like this problem is blowing up, it's spreading, and all the conditions to make it worse are present. So at this point, it seems like harm reduction is the way forward. But I'm interested to hear your thoughts on that.
Okay, so your pushback is you think it's okay to do marijuana. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, marijuana, like basically whatever works and won't kill you, so that you can keep getting help and continue your recovery.
All right. Well, first and foremost, harm reduction, absolutely believe in it. Marijuana for medical purposes, always was in support of it. Always, and still am. Because there are things that marijuana can do, especially with people that suffer like for seizures or somebody who's got pain from cancer, you know, because in some cases, you know, the opioid's not going to work for that. So I completely agree with you. So there's no pushback. That's why you were saying I kind of knew where you were going. And MAT, you're familiar with MAT, medication assisted treatment?
Yes.
It's all harm reduction. So we have people come into our treatment center, and I know, well, most 12-step programs, if you're not abstinence-based, if you come in and you're using stuff, you can't get in. They won't let you stay at the meetings. They can't force you out. They won't let you come. Most treatment providers use a 12-step model, and they won't let you come in if you insist on using something else. This is something I do that I know most people don't do. If you come into our treatment center, confidential recovery, and your drug of choice was an opioid, and you're now on an opioid blocker, or you're on a taper from Suboxone or Vivitrol,
Mm-hmm.
and you're smoking marijuana, we let you in with the idea that I'd rather have somebody who's willing to take a look at their substance use disorder and talk about it and work a taper or look at harm reduction versus saying to somebody, you can't get help until you're abstinent. Because I remember once when I went into I had a gastric bypass many years ago. I used to weigh more than the two of you put together that I can see right now. And I remember the day before my surgery, I was 333 pounds. I was as big around as I was tall. And I remember going in, I had to go see a psychologist because they wanted to see how I would do if I lost weight and I was thinner and I was physically more attractive. I said, I don't think I'll have a problem with that, So the day before surgery, I'm sitting with the nurse, they're doing the pre-op stuff. And there's like 4 of us in the room. They have these special chairs for big people and special desks for big people, because I was one of those big people. And they said, you were supposed to lose 10 pounds before the surgery. Mm-hmm. And I said, if I knew how to do that, I wouldn't be here talking about going under the knife. So, and that was, it was almost 16 years ago that I had the surgery. And I kept off 95% of my weight. And this last year, because of COVID, and I can't blame COVID, I gained weight because of COVID. Well, it's true though, but now, and thank God for Zoom, and I'm doing a television show next week and they want me to, go up in the studio. And I go, I can't wear anything that doesn't have elastic in the waist right now with my sweatpants. So I don't want to wait a couple months to lose some weight. So my wife and I are aggressively working on some stuff. But my point is, I didn't have the tools for that. So I absolutely agree with step down. I also agree with, MAT, medication assisted treatment. I also agree in harm reduction. But when I first heard about harm reduction, this is why I was really concerned about it. Because as somebody who ran a nonprofit working with homeless people, and people that, they used to call it community throwaways, and people who just, were behind all kinds of, roadblocks. There was a group up in, I think it was Portland, Oregon. They opened up this housing project where if we all stayed there and we qualified for it because we had a drinking problem or addiction problem or a homeless problem, housing problem, or can't get a job problem, whatever, they put a group of like 35 people in there. They mostly were single men and women. And every day, you'd come down, you'd see the case manager, and they would pass out a bottle of whatever your favorite drink was, or, some 40-ounce beers, and then you can go back to your room and drink. And the thinking was, this will keep people out of the ER because now they have a safe place to drink. I never thought of that as harm reduction. And, and it caused a real problem because security, for some reason, would go off at 8:00 at night. So all their street friends would come in and party. So it was a great model when it started, but I absolutely agree. And, any licensed treatment provider that says they won't let people come in, but we know that if we get you in a seat and we talk about abstinence and we talk about harm reduction and we talk about getting off of things. I mean, there's this huge conversation now around marijuana, ready for this, taking the place of opioids for pain. And it's legal now in a few states, I think 8 or 10, and the feds are talking about legalizing it nationally. And the only problem I have with that is that young people who take in the high THC content of marijuana now from ages 15 to 25, and there's really no evidence, long-term studies yet, but they say the brain stops developing if you put a level of THC in your body on a regular basis. So when I talk to parents about that, I just go, we have to make informed decisions. I mean, we just had a 9-month-old, recently in San Diego overdose from opioids. Wow. Got a hold of something that mom or dad had left out. And you've heard about people that are dying, young children, infants, because they take an edible that's left on the table. So there needs to be some responsibility with the harm reduction. But look, if tomorrow I was diagnosed with something terminal and you live long enough, you get it, the question and the pain was going to be great. And I decided not to go for chemotherapy or something of that nature. would I make a decision about taking edibles to deal with the pain? And I'm a guy with, 37 years of recovery. That would be a difficult decision because I don't think I'd want to live with the pain. And I'm not sure I'd want to go for the treatment. So, not that I'm planning that and I don't want to have to deal with that decision, but I think it's up to individuals. And I think the edible concept of marijuana was a game changer for people who suffer from things. So you didn't have to push back. I'm in the same bus.
Nice.
But is it a choice for me today, knowing what I know? No, because I believe with this disease I have, if I take in marijuana, and first of all, there wouldn't be enough of it for me to be happy because that's how my mind works. Or someone says, hey, we've got some cocaine that's not addictive. I never even tried near beer. I don't want to run the risk personally. But I do believe the way you believe. I agree with that.
Understandable.
And I'll piss people off saying that, but because of my age, I don't care what people think, because there's no science, and in the emerging science right now is marijuana is becoming a better tool, and I think now that it's legal, and once doctors start getting more comfortable and get permission to utilize it for dealing with different modalities, I think we're going to see it as use it as a medicinal, just like people put honey and lemon when you have a sore throat.
Yeah, put a little weed in your tea. Just kidding. But yeah, I totally feel you, and I agree with everything you said. So let's talk a little bit.
By the way, I'd like you to call my wife and tell her what it's like to believe everything I say, because I haven't achieved that goal yet. Yeah.
Let's talk about your book.
Okay.
The Opioid Epidemic. And anyone watching, you can see copies of the book behind Scott there. Beautiful cover. Tell us about the book and what we can expect to find inside of it. What do we learn?
Well, it's a large font for older people to read that don't have bifocals, and there's no pictures, so please don't get excited except of me on the back. The concept of the book, really, it's a 3-year journey, and I had a different title for it. Originally, it was going to be "You're Not God, That Job Is Taken," and I hope to get that book out next. But the idea of the book is I gathered stories over the last couple of years from families who've just run into this catastrophic event. Some families who have lost a loved one, a young loved one, stories about, the reality, pieces of information about big pharma, how it kind of came about. Spoke to some, criminal justice experts. Our local district attorney did a nice contribution in the book about what's happening in the criminal side and what they're trying to do now. And they're actually going after prosecuting distributors of fentanyl. So if somebody overdoses and dies, and they can get information from somebody in that inner circle in their investigation who actually sold them the medication, they're being tried for involuntary manslaughter.
Oh, wow.
So, but will the slings out there get a clue that they might go to jail for selling drugs? Probably not. Yeah. But the book is about the stories of, and hopefully a workbook that'll help people answer questions, and more importantly, how to ask for help. That's really the core of the book, and knowing that you're not alone, knowing there's a disease that we call addiction, and knowing that there's help and there's hope. And I really hope that people will pick the book up and get some education around it. My number's in there, that's 619-993-2738. And I really encourage people to call me or text me, and let's talk about what's going on.
Excellent. That's really cool. So it's sort of an overview of literally everything you would need to know about the opioid epidemic and how to get help if you or someone needs help.
Correct. And if you're not sure how to ask for help, we even talk about how to ask for help or recognize different, symptoms, or, what do you do to identify if somebody potentially might be, going through some major metamorphosis and change, because they're consuming something that is overtaking their body, their mind, and their soul, and not for the right reasons, but for the wrong reasons.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a good point. I think we should talk about that and just give people an idea of what to look for. So we have a lot of therapists in here. This video will probably also be seen by lots of people out in the community who have friends and family who might be needing help. What are the signs and symptoms that people should be looking for that would lead them to call someone like you or seek help for someone they know?
Right. Yeah, and if you call someone like me, you're going to get all my sarcasm, my humor, and you're going to get a dose of reality. I think what's important to know is most of us in our heart, when someone we care about, something's happening to them or something's changing, something's different, the behavioral change, weight loss, isolation, indignance about wanting to do this or do that, or to be, acting out in a way. Most of us sense that from somebody. And sometimes it's just great to sit down with someone and say, look, what I see, this is more of what to do. What I see scares me. Can we talk? Rather than saying, I look in your eyes and your pupils are dilated. Are you high? Because that person is going to shut down and camouflage and go deeper into their, rabbit hole. So those are big things. Isolation with children specifically, and friend changes or lack of friends, if you will, weight gain, weight loss. And, the internet's become a huge addiction for a lot of young people today. Gambling, is accessible online everywhere. So, obviously bank account shifts. I was just on the clubhouse yesterday talking about what happens in divorce. And a lot of times the person who's acting out will spend a lot of money and do inappropriate things. And I think most of us will kind of get a sense pretty quickly, but it's how we approach it that allows us, I think, to get somewhat of an answer that makes sense. And then in most families, there's the person who suffers from the addiction or the allergy. Then there's the person who lives with them or others who are enabling them by not saying anything or kind of watching it go on, or when it gets really bad, attacking out of fear. And those trigger words will cause the user or the abuser to, again, camouflage their activity, hide what they do, and it'll again put them in a rabbit hole. So it's important for the family to get informed as well, not just the person who has the issue. Because most of my phone calls come from somebody who cares about somebody. Because most addicts aren't going to call and go, hey, I heard you're an addict in recovery, and you've got the vision of how I can use California sober way. I heard you, and Danny even challenged you, and you said it's okay. No, that's not what I said. What I said is one size doesn't fit all, and harm reduction is critical. Abstinence is important, but learning how to live without being dependent on something that's mood altering on a regular basis is just a quick summary around. I mean, I have an allergy. It's an allergy, just like diabetes. If we don't check our blood sugar level, if you have diabetes and you don't put insulin into your body, you're not going to feel well. You're going to be sick and you may die. So that's the simple message. This is a disease of addiction. And I've never met anybody who's ever raised their hand and said, hey, Scott, one day my mom told me I'm an addict. And ever since then, I've been so excited about it. I've tried to put poison in my body on a daily basis. And I hope one day I die young. I've never heard that from anybody.
Yeah. Well said. So for people that would be looking for help or more information, where can we send them to connect with you?
Oh, for God's sakes, Dan, put my information on your website. You call me directly, 619-993-2738. Let me do it again, 619-993-2738. I'm going to do it one more time, and that's for the people that are loaded that are hearing this. 619-993-2738. You can call or text me, Scott H. Silverman, Silverman. Just Google me. You can go through social media. You can punch me, on the phone. You can do an instant message. You can go on Instagram. You can just call me. But I dare you to do that. Don't wait. Don't think, oh, well, he's in San Diego and I'm in Wisconsin or Florida or Texas. Doesn't matter. I will help you. And anybody who hears this for the rest of the month of April, I will give you 10 minutes of free coaching. And when you look at my rate, when you go to my website, yourcrisiscoach.com, that's not inexpensive. But I get better in my own recovery when I help others. I want to make a living like everybody else does. But for the month of April, because that's when the book's coming out, because when the book comes out, the coaching fees will go up. I'll offer a 10-minute free consultation, suggestion, coaching, crisis intervention. And if we decide we want to work together, we'll figure out a way.
Beautiful. We will include links to all of your socials and website and that phone number as well in the show notes. Definitely recommend to anyone watching to give Scott a call. He is definitely the real deal. He's in it for the right reasons. And, you know, you've been there, Scott, so you get it. So I really appreciate that. And I appreciate you for sharing your time and knowledge with us today.
Well, thank you, Dan. And you know how we connected, you know, you're mentally fit intrigued me. And I thought that was a great handle. And I think I reached out to you and said, how can we work together? And I think the whole concept behind mentally fit, you know, it's such a great platform because it's more than just substance use disorders. It's behavioral health, it's communicating, it's heartfelt exchanges, it's listening to people you care about. And it's important to be informed because that way you can make intelligent decisions about what next steps look like.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm glad we made this happen sooner than later, and I'm sure we'll have more conversations to come. So thank you very much.
Anytime, my friend. Anytime.